What up, YouTube? This is Steven Talbert. This is Tabby Reacts, and this is my reaction to the Sony press conference, which just took place. So, before we start looking at the press conference, I want to kind of give you my first impressions, like what I thought before going into it. Like, I was really mixed. I was really cautiously optimistic about this. Like, I really liked what they did last year, but I was kind of really telling my brother, like, I honestly, just the way that Xbox kind of did their press conference, I thought they did a really good job. Like I thought seriously, Xbox did an awesome job, and I thought it's going to be hard for PlayStation to really match this press conference. So I thought I thought PlayStation, if they didn't really show hardware, it's going to be like slightly below. It'll probably be a little bit below Xbox or slightly above them. But I thought the way they did, PlayStation didn't really care themselves. Like they completely destroyed that. Like they destroyed that nation. Last year was basically known as the E3 of dreams, pretty much. This is basically part two in a lot of sense, and I think honestly, at the end of the day, people were going to say PlayStation really wanted it. And I completely agree with them. Like they showed us so many games and so many different things. Like they were awesome. So kind of going into kind of the press conference overall, like the first thing they really showed us was God of War. God of War, which is really interesting. God of War is one of these long franchises for Sony. They've been pretty much, every single game has been pretty awesome. They usually use these games to really show kind of graphic capabilities, stuff to kind of show. They never really have great story, but they've been good to play. So my expectations, like I actually never really played God of War at all. I like the series, but never really played it, never really gave it time. But for me, like I was really blown away by kind of the first couple of minutes of gameplay. I thought it was really realistic, surprisingly really realistic compared to what I've seen in the past of God of War. It looked like an awesome game to play. I think they did a lot of good things. It was cool to see a different type of Kratos overall. They gave it like a very older type Kratos versus we're seeing like very much like a middle aged type Kratos. There's always been like one consistent type thing, and so I thought that was really cool to see him kind of changed overall. And so it's real interesting. I think it's basically, so God of War is probably pretty much a reboot of the series on a lot of sense. And so instead of being Greek, they're now Norse mythology, and so they follow like the Norse type gods and all that. And so it's real interesting. It has to deal with him, Kratos, and probably either his son or this kid he found one day. And so he has this nice relationship with this kid, and that he's trying to raise and all that. And I think I think one of the things that God of War always lacked is kind of playing with the heartstrings. I think this does it really with the kid in a lot of sense, and I think they do a great job. I'm looking forward to see what they got. I like the action sequences. Like I like the way they learn like different moves. It'll be interesting to see. Like there was like this thing where you shoot the deer, and I noticed like you get XP. You learn certain things. Your abilities get better and better after you kill certain things. I'm wondering like what does that really do overall? Like does it make it more of an RPG type game? It'll be interesting to see what happens with that particular thing. Then probably the biggest surprise of the night was basically a game done by Studio Ben, and they made a game called Days Gone. Days Gone. If you don't know Studio Ben is this studio is a PlayStation studio that comes from Bend, Oregon. They have a pretty good lineage of games, but they've been really dormant for like the past 5, 6. They've been dormant for a very long time actually, and so they're about due for like a game. And so like people, I follow this guy named Colin Morati. One of his main prediction for like 5 years in a row is that they're gonna announce the new big game, and they finally did it. They finally announced that game, and that was Days Gone. And Days Gone is this pretty much awesome game. It really reminds me of like The Last of Us in a lot of sense. It has that same vein, same type of feeling. It's a very old. It's a zombie world. This game is set in like a zombie world it's been a while. Like they've seen a lot of different things. They've seen so many different deaths, so many different things. And so they're now trying to figure out what's next. And so what's cool about it is this main character is basically part of this motorcycle game, and he's kind of trying to support the motorcycle game or whoever survived that are not zombies and all that. And so it's really cool. Like they gave one last gameplay demo that had, which was really interesting. Like it reminds me of the way they do zombies is very much like reminiscent of like DayZ in a lot of sense. Like it's like this huge hordes of zombies, and so it'll be interesting to see if that like if that's really the case. Like when you find zombies, like it'll be like ever ending, and so like you'll have times where it's like nice and slow, then all of a sudden like zombies come like by the thousands and thousands and thousands, and so it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think the biggest question about this game, Days Gone, is actually what it does to like Naughty Dog. That's what I really thought about. It was like what it does to Naughty Dog. Like, will Naughty Dog really consider doing a Last of Us 2 in a sense? Because it would be kind of really interesting for Sony to have two of their big studios really do like a two zombie games like in a row that really look similar in a lot of sense. I think Days Gone really borrows from like what they did in Last of Us in a sense, because they're both are somewhat, they're both come from the same group of studios in a sense. And so it'll be interesting to see if like will Naughty Dog think about a different IP altogether, or will they continue doing that? And so that's one really interesting question that I come up with from Days Gone. The third game they showed was The Last Guardian, and that was good to see. We got another bird dog. I think the biggest thing for The Last Guardian is they showed finally a date. We actually have a time. It's going to come out actually this year in October, and that's amazing. And honestly, that's all I needed for that game. I'm super hyped for that game, and I'm definitely going to try to play it because I think it's going to be such a fascinating game, because this game has been pretty much in the works for like 10 years. It's going to be what's so exciting, what's so interesting about October is we're going to have two games that both have taken a very long time. That's Final Fantasy 15 and Last Guardian. And those two games are probably going to be the most interesting games to see which one actually did good and which one didn't. And so that's kind of my opinion about that. Moving forward, they went to the fourth game they showed was a game called Detroit, which you kind of make a lot of these interesting decisions. It's basically takes place in Detroit. It's basically in a world where like androids exist, and androids serve the world, but they have suddenly become like kind of rogue in a lot of sense. And so the what they showed us in terms of this demo is that they showed us the guy named Connor, who's basically a police officer who basically tries to stop some of these androids, which is real interesting because if you look at the past demo for Detroit, it's actually about this rogue android thing. And so it'll be interesting to see how they kind of combine those two together. The choices are interesting because there's so many different branches in this game. Looking forward to see what they get from that. I'll be interested to see what's the date for that. Will it come out next year, or will it come out the year after that? But for what it's worth, it's coming out real soon, and I think there's a lot of interest for that game. And so the last game, the fifth game they showed to kick off like their 5 straight games was Horizon Zero Dawn, which is by far one of the most intriguing games that I've seen. Like, I think honestly that's the game that really pulls my attention out. Like, I like all 5. Like, I think God of War is probably my second favorite game out of this press conference. But I think Horizon Zero Dawn still manages to get my attention as my number 1 game. Like, I love the atmosphere. Like, you ride on basically like this gigantic deer, and you see so many different like crazy machines, or you actually first got to see an actual bunny living creature, which is kind of cool. So you live in a world that has machines and live on a world. I love the idea of it. So it's basically this post-apocalyptic world where pretty much man is reduced to the Stone Age, but we also now have machine animals. And so it's real interesting. I'm real excited to see what they get. I think it has a really deep story. It was cool to see the RPG elements of this game. Overall, like to see the map and see so many different things that makes it really good to see. Really like that as well. And so I thought the first 5 games overall were great. I think they're somewhat similar in a lot of sense. They both have really rushing nature type stuff. But still for sure interesting to see. And then they went into kind of probably the most intriguing part is they went into the PlayStation VR. I think one of the most interesting things is how would they approach PlayStation VR in a lot of sense, because they really had to talk about PlayStation VR. because this is their first time before it launches out. They got to talk, and so one of the biggest questions regarding VR is are they actually going to show actual good big games? And I think they did. They showed this space game, which I'm forgetting the name, but it looks like a really nice, good space exploration type game. You have a gun. There's actually if you look at Wario64, he goes by that's his Twitter handle. He shows this VR type gun that you may be holding for the PlayStation that uses the kind of the move sticks and stuff like that. So that may be interesting to see how they incorporate that as well. But then they showed us really nice project type games. They showed us Batman VR, which looks awesome. Hopefully, it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. They showed us Star Wars. For me, that's probably going to be the VR seller. In terms of that's really is the game that you're going to show your friends. It's going to be a little short 15-20 minute demo, but this is where you pretty much make dreams happen. You always want to be in a VR, X-wing cockpit or something like that, and so you pretty much get to do that. I think the biggest surprise for VR was pretty much the Resident Evil 7. What was interesting is how they started that with this from the makers of Kitchen. And honestly, I almost thought originally it was a full version of Kitchen. They just made the house instead of they just made the house. And so so that was just part of it. And so I thought, and kind of thinking about Kitchen and all that, I thought that was a really ingenious way to kind of really introduce maybe Resident Evil as a whole. And then you go into the kitchen, and the kitchen actually points out there's 7 things. There's a 7 things, and that points out to Resident Evil 7. And I think it was one of the biggest surprises. And what's cool about Resident Evil 7 is it's imminent. Pretty much it comes out in February of 2017, which means it only needs a couple more months to go. So it's a game that you announced right in June, and it's out in February, which is awesome to see. So it's coming, and it's also coming to VR pretty much. So pretty much you can go into VR the minute you get it. So that's probably one of the biggest, that's definitely by far one of the biggest things. And what's cool about Resident Evil is they're going back to its roots. Because one of the biggest complaints about Resident Evil is it's getting more actiony. I think it definitely goes back with the roots if they do kind of continue with this house type of theme. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with that. And so overall, the VR was great. Kind of moving forward, they showed us the Lego game, the Lego Star Wars game. That looked awesome. The EA Call of Duty looked pretty cool. The Call of Duty actually really caught me off guard initially. I really was surprised that was actually Call of Duty, because I thought the gun mechanics were a little different from what I'm usually used to. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in terms of that and space and all that. I'm looking forward to see more of that in the future. And then they ended up with kind of more demos. And overall, that pretty much really ends kind of my impressions in terms of the PlayStation thing. Overall, they did an awesome job. They blew it out of the water. And guys, kind of give comments below. Kind of tell me what you thought about the press conference. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Give me some thoughts about it. Like this video if you like it. Thank you for hanging in with me. If you've seen a lot of my videos for E3, I'm trying to cover most I can, and it takes a lot of energy to kind of do these videos. I hope you like what I did. Like down below and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. And I hope you have a great week. And looking forward to talking to you more.